Got everybody coming in. Let's see, how do we want to do this? We want to have Mark be surgeon of arms to start it. Sure. And then he'll call me up and then I'll call you up. Now you put your slides in at the very beginning. Should I skip over those or?
So that was meant. Okay, so that was meant to be.
That's right.
Yep.
No worries.
Skip over some. Unless you want it.
It's colder down here. We'll go ahead and do that. In a good spot. Yes, that'd be awesome. Thank you. Pass this along.
Try to get back.
Oh, you gotta.
Oh,
Or bring it over there.
Yes.
I didn't bring more cups. I apologize. I forgot the cups.
I'll just set them along.
I like her already.
I think name and email are the important parts.
I'll wave across the aisle.
Yeah.
Oh, wine's back there.
Wastebasket.
That's cool. Wastebasket in that car.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
Yep. And
Yes, ma'am.
you're going to be circular already.
Hey.
And then I will do my piece and well, this will be Toastmasters and part of it is what you might need to do when we take a break is okay, so it's good.
So I'll kick it off then.
Yes, you do.
Shall I do that now?
Yes, that would be lovely.
And you're sounding very childish. This is my first time being sergeant at arms, so
Here.
do be patient.
There you go.
Okay, very good. So we will call our third Toastmasters After Dark meeting to order. And I would now like to call up our presiding officer, Lori Lawrence.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. This lovely occasion, TechMasters After Dark, was created to give all of us more time to dig into a topic that all of us love at Toastmasters and TechMasters. And TechMasters means on Tuesday mornings are where we were getting pizza in the classroom at 7:45 a.m. And then we adjourn at 9 a.m. Improving has been very gracious for beverages, pizza, space. Who has been improving Twin Cities, that is our sponsor upstairs, and they teach classes as well as do consulting around, I would say, Scrum training, other leadership training. There's material in the hall upstairs. So why TechMasters After Dark? Part of this is to, like I mentioned, give us a chance to really explore a topic. Another is to welcome people to see another side of Toastmasters and to encourage you to consider perhaps joining us at TechMasters. This is part of our membership drive to get creative about showing off a little bit and welcoming new people to come meet all of us. So today, our Toastmaster for this evening is Vince Bolger, who is our VP of Education and also another podcaster. Please welcome. Yes.
Lori. Good evening, everyone. As mentioned, my name is Vince Boner. I'm a co-founder of the club. I was with us when we created the club over a decade ago. And as Lori was mentioning, we do these events to kind of showcase what we've learned and how we've been able to apply them and how you could apply them if you were to care to join us. All right, so the podcasting theme, when we're trying to think of different ways to apply our communication leadership skills, and obviously in a technical setting, podcasting is kind of a natural fit. We've talked about things like, so you want to be a conference presenter, and that's kind of a secondary goal of ours, fact, the founding member, Mike Benkovich, is someone who's been giving presentations all around the world for a very long time. But one of them that we've had interest in, that I helped start a podcast, and I had no idea we were going to be doing anything like this. It just happened to be something that felt pretty natural to me. So obviously it's something that's very interesting, and if we're technical people, it's something that we might want to do. I personally, I would certainly do podcasts on technical things, but the podcast that came to my doorstep one day was actually a football podcast. I don't know if any of you guys are big fans of football, or if you guys ever go on Reddit, but the subreddit for the Vikings, I'm actually the number 2 moderator. So then when they were trying to put together people to be on the podcast, they thought, wow, let's go get some of the power mods and stuff. So anyway, the role of today, there'll be a couple of speakers here, myself, Lori, and Mark. And for the demo team, we're going to have Lori showing us how to really podcast, because I've typically been more of just a panelist or on the podcast. I haven't been running a podcast before. So Lori's kind of the real expert there. But I will be talking about webcasting. That's another kind of way to do podcasting, or any kind of streaming that you may want to do. And if you can actually host a podcast in that order, in that manner as well. Then we'll have a podcasting panel of myself and Lori, answering any questions you might want to have. Okay, so first up, we're going to have kind of the big main event here. What is podcasting? How do you do it? And you have a big demonstration here about the things to think about. Please help me welcome Lori Reynolds, speaking on podcasting tips and techniques.
All right. First off, I want to do a sound check. We always do a sound check when we do podcasting. And when you're in a room with fans and who knows what else, Nick, can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Perfect. Vince, can you hear me?
No. Jill, how can I say no if I actually loud and
Well,
clear,
I
Lori.
didn't say, are you listening? I asked you, can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, very good, very good. So tonight, we're going to go through some of the tips that are my favorites for getting started with podcasting. I kind of like to know your level of background in all of this. Brian and Kim table, right? What background do you have in podcasting?
I have 0 background in podcasting,
Right?
but I do music stuff, so I have a lot of knowledge about software and music stuff.
I use it in teaching,
Okay,
and my students use it, but I'd like to learn how to use it better.
that's okay. Very good,
I'm an avid listener, but nothing about producing.
very good. We've heard Vince's story. Got it?
Listener and looking forward to learning how to do it.
Okay. Loris?
I am an activist on certain conservation issues, and I should become more up on social media and therefore podcasting. I don't know if that would fall under the umbrella of social media or not, but I want to know more about it.
Very good. Can you introduce yourself too?
No, I'm not going to. My name is Tim Deegan, and I have a company, TBD Technical Solutions, and provided solutions for companies for years. And been IT and video and a lot of this stuff. Actually, years ago, I directed a video thing for a cable network. But I've never done podcasting. I do actually have a setup for it at home with all the stuff, because I was actually looking at possibly getting into YouTube. And that's I can actually have a channel kind of set to go, and then I have all the gear. Let's just put it that way. And so I have it, and I have an understanding, but again, I don't know where to really start.
Very good. Welcome. Mark?
Yes, I listen to podcasts every now and then, and that's about it.
Very good. As I said before, my name is Lori Lorenz. I own a company called Pixie Nest. We produce mobile apps, and I use podcasting as a way to do marketing. We did cross promotion. For example, I would put together a t-shirt, go out and do like a book signing fair, and give away 15-minute podcasts. And then the authors would distribute the link to podcasts that was on my website to all of their constituents. And then I would distribute that episode to iTunes and everywhere else. So therefore, we get cross promotion. Their people heard about me, and my people heard about them. So that was one quick way that was low cost to get some marketing out. And then of course you promote it with social media, so that all hooks together. Now, tonight, I'm going to take you from what do I need to think about when I'm starting a podcast, take you through the strategy of it, as well as my favorite tips and techniques you want to be aware of as you're doing your podcasting. So let's start. Very first reason, why are you doing a podcast? I heard teaching, I heard travel and promotion. Do you have a topic yet, Tim?
I have, well, probably the same too many.
Very good. So we get to zoom in on one, right? You had NFL.
Football.
Football. Very good. So in that topic, are you going to be an amateur? Is this a hobby? Are you going to talk about it for fun? Is it a public service, like teaching, or a topic that's near and dear to your heart that you can engage in? Or for me, it was business. So I was doing business. Nick, this might be something you would take in a business route. And there are different things you consider when it's business. Next, set a time and money budget. You can spend as much time and as much money as you want or could afford on podcasting, like anything else. It's a time investment. What can you commit to? Some people create episodes before they ever launch, and then they do them every quarter. Depends on your production. I tried to have an episode a week, once a week. But then I had to schedule talent to come in and speak with me. I had all sorts of other events. So I tried to do a batch at a time. I could get like maybe 6 episodes in the can, and then I'm set for 6 weeks. So the idea is figure out what time it takes. Also, if you get it all set up properly and you coach your speakers so they don't swear, don't libel, don't harass, all these things, then you have less editing you have to do. And if you can manage the time, you don't have to manage for time. I would cut it off and say, you know, this digital voice recorder, it only goes 30 minutes. I'm sorry, it's just gonna stop. It'll go for days. But set your time. Because the longer it goes, the more it's gonna cost you, right? Money investment. Again, I can very simply take these 2 little pieces and go out and get what I need for a podcast. Very inexpensive way to get started. Go anywhere. I've also had a studio, the table, you know, the mix board, the theater curtains, the sound foam, all those things. You can invest as much as you want. Energy commitment. How long can you keep this going before you just say, please, mercy, I give up? Does it energize you, or does it just feel like, oh my God, I gotta do this again? So think about that. This is coming back to you why. Because the energy you bring to the podcast is what people are going to hear first. So it gets you excited. In whatever language you teach, Spanish. Very fun. Equipment and upgrades. I would start small and make sure your flow, your workflow is straight. You know, just start with a digital voice recorder, your phone, something, and just do the steps one at a time so that you know kind of what you're doing. And then you can start upgrading as you get comfortable with it. And then you have different scenarios you can use. So when you're small, with your phone, digital voice recorder, you can go anywhere, set it on the table. This is very good for on location. Another piece, this setup I'll show you with the Yeti microphone, laptop of your choice, and headphones, and the memory foam, or the big foam, sound foam that I didn't want to bring because they're like this big. I would bring a stand for the clamp, and then I would create a shelf around my table. Or a door with construction noise. Studio.
The whole thing is planned, by the way.
Yes. Sometimes ambient noise can be interesting. Other times it's distracting. To the studio.
Can I get back afterwards?
I'm sorry.
If I leave this room, can I get back?
Yes.
Just knock on the door.
Yes. The studio. The studio I had was in St. Paul, right next to a railroad track with a very busy training schedule. So as we were going, and then the table and the drinks were going, they said, oh, look, it's 10 o'clock, right on time, and then just keep talking. So you work it into your content, and it's more interesting. So that was fine. And this is also fun for your students. They can think of the name for their studio. What's the name of your high school? Or what school is it? Shakopee High School. So they can come up with a mascot. What's the mascot of Shakopee?
Saber.
A what?
Sabers.
Sabers. Ooh, the cutting edge school. So you could come up with a studio name and you say, live from Shakopee High School studio. It is the blank show. And that is part of having a studio. Tip 4, relationships turn into episodes. This is huge. Content is king. Podcasts, websites, everything. What you want to do is ask your friends, ask your business associates, ask people you've never met before. Ask people what their story is. And this all becomes content. So that starts that triggering the gratitude. You say, what's your story? What is with the sparkly fingernails thing I've been seeing? You know, what's going on here? And as you talk to somebody, you tie it back to the theme of your podcast episode, which is, let's say, digital business. I would have never known you can conduct a business on Facebook with an iPad out of your home. Who would have known? And I'm all about digital business, so I'm really intrigued, really? And you can do this in what, half an hour? That's pretty cool. And then, as you're talking to people, and they get into it, they get comfortable with it. When you're interviewing someone, they're much more comfortable than trying to do to a microphone. It can be intimidating, right? So cherry pick your best partners. And then the people who need help, send them TechMasters. And we can help you with your confidence. Technique number 1. This is the secret to podcasting. It's an MP3 file. That's it. How cool is that? You get an MP3 file and you can post it and you are a podcaster. Very simple. And of course, there are some guidelines. iTunes won't publish you if you have certain things. So you want to read up on the podcasting distribution networks about what's allowed and what's not allowed. For example, if you are education and K-12 content, it has to be family friendly and there are guidelines. Same thing for apps. So here, when you're making your MP3 file, 3 steps. Of course, you record it. And then step number 2 is you clean it up and export it. That's called sweetening. And that's the software on the laptop, sometimes on your phone, whatever the app is. And you're cleaning up the sound and hopefully don't have to do too much editing of the content. And then publishing and distributing. And that's when you export into the MP3 format from whatever you recorded it on. Now I can take an MP4, which is video, strip out the audio, export that as an MP3. That's another tool. So you can take the video from a webcast and pull the soundtrack from it. A lot of times you will record with your most amount of data. You'll do a video recording that you're going to post to YouTube. Whether you stream it live or you record it and save it separately. Then you pull it into the tool, like I have Premiere Pro from Adobe, and then I have like stereo sound coming off of my YouTube recording. And I can pull that out, make it an MP3 file, post it. And in fact, Premiere Pro says, where do you want me to send this file, Lori? You want me to send it to Facebook? You want me to send it to iTunes? It'll actually log in to the distribution service and post it for you. And you put the metadata on it for title. And that's the distributing part. You're going to distribute it via a channel like YouTube. Technique number 2, KISS. Keep it simple. Technology. Like I was talking about, USB microphones and recorders are the best. So this is a Yeti, and this is simply a Sony digital voice recorder. They both have USB connectivity. And that gets from here to your computer. Amps and mixers. If you decide you want to go the next step, this is where you bring in microphones, amps, and mixers, like Tim would know how to set up. It all match and talk to each other and have the right impedance and right blah, 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 right? That's the next step. That's kind of fun. When you have multiple microphones and little arms, like in a radio station, and you have sound phone. This is where you have a studio. We actually, in Princess Wishing Star, that was our studio in St. Paul, we cut a hole in an old oak dining room table. I took it up to my dad, took one of the leaves out. And it was exactly the silhouette of the amp, mixer, and rack mount DVR recorder. 3 pieces. And one, face up, set it down in there. And then all the cables were down below. And we fed up the microphone cables to little extending arms that were just, spring mounted inside. And we had 4 places, and we drilled holes in the table to put the spring arms. It was a real old table, so we didn't feel too bad. And we could do the voice recording right there. It was great. Now, apps and the editors. You can use something simple like Stitcher on your phone. You can use one of my favorites, which is Audacity, which is a free software on Mac or PC platform. And the other one I use is Premiere Pro or Adobe Voice. And that's part of the Creative Cloud suite of tools. So the idea here is find your favorite editor. What does Shopify have available? Audacity. Okay. That's pretty straightforward. You're not going to be doing too much exciting stuff there. Now, part of this too is the intros and outros, the little sound, instead of a credits that combine, you're doing some audio credits. You have an intro with music and the name of your podcast and the name of your studio, and then that gets spliced underneath, and then an outro is thank you, please join us for our next episode, at the end. And that's where we'll need that as well for the editing.
But you can build that in like you had a studio or a video studio, you can build it in there and just like something as audio.
Yes. A lot of times I record it once, splice it many times. Yes. So here, better sound. When you invest in better sound. So balance your input when you start. We've got volume and gain on these microphones, even this little Yeti. Just like when you have that sound caterpillar, favorite word picture, sound caterpillar crawling across the screen and Audacity Ring. If it gets too fat, it's too hot. It turns red on the edges. That means you're blowing it out. You're losing content. It just becomes too loud. So you want to keep it down in the green zone so it's easy to hear. Next one, reducing noise. The construction guys are going to do what construction guys do, right? They're going to do their thing. So what can you do about it? Well, that's when you bring in noise canceling, noise reduction pieces like the eggshell curtain foam that you've seen before. Sometimes it's actually like installed in the ceiling. Do you have a studio at Chuck?
Not that I use.
No. Okay. You can simply get for like $50 a stack of 4 to 8 of these panels that are like 36 by 48 inches. And I leave them loose and then just prop them up in my little workspace I've got. I've got a standing workstation and kind of like a hallway situation. And I just put one at the top, 2 on the sides, and 1 on the back, and wrap around my microphone. And that kind of cancels in the echo that's going on. And it helps reduce some of the chatter that's going on. And then post-production. Some of you are familiar with that term. After you're done recording, you've done your best. You've tried to reduce the noise. You've got all your dials dialed in. But at the end, you still want to do what's called speeding. Inside Audacity, you can do the editing so that you can adjust what that caterpillar looks like. Make sure that it's a nice, strong, mostly even. You're going to have peaks and valleys, but post-speeding is another important part. That's when you learn production.
And you're talking about when you, like, if you're talking to 4 different people and their voices are different. volumes, you're adjusting all of that.
Well, I'm gonna talk about that too. Because when I did the microphone pieces, you have your headphones on and you can hear yourself speak, right? And you're on a rolling chair. And the easiest thing to do is to roll in closer and speak louder until everybody, yes, you sound check everyone and dial on their microphone so they can hear. But as a coordinator, when you're running your podcast, you need to have a hand signal like speak louder or speak lower or back off or something, so that you don't have to blatantly say, you should really speak into that microphone thing. Don't talk to your friend over there. You're not pointing your face at the microphone, and quit waving your arms. Nobody can see you. That's the other piece.
What do you sweeten? Sweeten volume? And what else?
Volume. And if there's a frequency of noise that you can cancel out.
Like a hum,
Like
like
a hum.
whatever that is.
Yes, it's like a hum.
Like your lights.
Like the lights. That's the other piece. Again, creating an environment. And, a dead giveaway is if your glass is red. Oh, here's another tip. You want to give water to your folks, right? But you don't give them something that's glass on a hard surface because then you just hear clink, 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 clink.
Also, ice cubes are bad.
Ice cubes. Unless you want special effects. However, so water bottles are good. And
With ice cubes.
that's good. And then also watch out for cats. We had 2 podcasts. And one had podcasts, yes. They had attitudes, so they would come in and be
Clue into the idea that you're paying attention to something else, and then get in the way of you paying attention to that other thing. So that might include a computer or a microphone.
well, even better if you can lay on the computer and pause everything. That's good. Or if you're locked into the next room and can't come in, make as much noise as possible. That will also guarantee you results. All right.
It's just children and cats, I'm confused.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Technique number 4, self-publishing. You do not need to be part of a big network to have a podcast. I use WordPress to distribute my items because I'm integrating my website into social media and other websites and doing promotional pieces. Some folks will just create their MP3 file, send it to a distribution point, and that's it. No website. But I want traffic, so I have a website. Excuse me. So for me, it's really fun to have my website and publish my MP3 on my website, use a plugin for WordPress, Blueberry is my favorite, and then that is logged into, connected to my iTunes account, which is going to become Apple Music someday, or I'll have to move it to another distributor because iTunes is going away. And then once I put it on my website, turn on my Blueberry metadata saying what the title is, what the author was, kind of description, all those things you see in iTunes when you're scrolling through to see what it is, not to mention a picture. So what I would do is like this was the cover, I would add a picture of the guest at the top. And then that would be like the episode cover. And then people would go, oh yeah, I know that one.
Talking about a thumbnail on it, basically.
Essentially, you create the artwork that goes with it, and it pulls it with the RSS feed at the same time. This is iTunes saying, oh, there's a new episode, and then it grabs it. And that's the subscription. So you will subscribe to iTunes, you have to create your account, say what kind of content it is, and then provide them some examples, and then Apple is policing this to make sure it is what you say it is.
Do you have to pay for that service?
No, you don't have to pay for that one. iTunes was pretty good about that. I'm not selling it. If I was charging something, then they'll take a percentage like apps. Also, for some of these episodes, like Vince is going to talk about YouTube, it's streaming to YouTube. A lot of times we would do video as well, and then post the video on YouTube. That was also a free service. Technique number 5. I mentioned some of these things already. So let's say you just record a conversation, you pop it up there, say, yep, that's my episode. Well, you can add music to the front and to the end, the intro, the outro, and you can go out to different sites and buy yourself a piece of music, or perhaps it's not gonna be there, so students can play some music for you, and you can record it. Yes.
Can you use the free music that's on YouTube from their editors?
I
Because you
think-
can go right into there and it's got all of that non-proprietary, it's tons of.
Yeah, I would read the fine print on what you can use it for and how you distribute it.
Last time, the last time I checked, it's free on YouTube, and there is some, depending on the ones, some of them have charges, but the ones that are free are pretty much public.
Right. Well, there's public domain and there's context,
Yeah, no, I understand what you're talking
right? And if you're trying to resell your podcast, that's not free music. Licensed music. Now, if it's public service, education pretty much is a shoe-in. But if you're doing anything for profit, you need to check on that.
So even though on YouTube you can use it, if you go on YouTube, you're not selling that, even if somebody puts ads on it, you're not selling that.
Right.
But if you actually sell your podcast,
If you have a subscription to a podcast, that's selling your podcast. So if you're offering a subscription service,
so are you offering a subscription service?
not at this point, but some of my clients were. So they would have log in and register to proprietary, like webinar, and then that would be recorded.
So for example, if I belong to a podcast, I apologize.
No, keep that.
No,
You
okay,
have- That's all right, I'll take 2 more questions and I gotta finish this.
Well, no, so if I log into, say, so if I belong to Bill Burr's podcast and I sign up to that, that's subscription service.
If you pay for it,
I don't.
then that is not a subscription. You could register for one, but a subscriber is someone, it's a paid subscription.
I just have it as my favorites or whatever.
Right. And that's why podcasting often has advertising. That's how it gets paid for, so they don't have to have a paid subscription and avoid all that licensing
And in
craziness.
that case, would you have paid for the music or would it be based on the
It depends.
We can talk later.
Okay, I'll shut up.
That is a rabbit hole.
Sorry, I had a lot of questions prepared, so.
That's all right.
We got time later too.
Yes,
We'll
we'll
definitely be
have
included.
later. Also, album episode photo. Take a picture, find something unique for that episode, and it helps people remember it. Even you could do the whole, show cover, and then at the bottom, I put in the episode information, the number, the date, the time, the location, who was on it, things like that. And that is a matter of record. Also, when you're doing a podcast, reward the person who came to be on your podcast. Give them a chance to say, hey, come see me at westhamilton.com. Come see me at Facebook. What's yours on Facebook? Your face.
Facebook, Nails to the Rescue.
Nails to the rescue. And then sometimes gifts. I would always have like a stylus or something to offer my guests. So they would remember me and think nicely about me when I say, hey, please post this on your website with a link back to mine. And that would help. I was lucky that I had a good network of close friends that they'd have to see me often and then the guilt would kick in and they said, okay, I finally posted it. All right, now let's take a look at some of these configurations. We're going to start small and work our way up to the streaming service and webcast. All right, step 1, digital voice recorder. This has 4 gig on board, it's a 32 gig SIM card. And very, very simple display, record. It has a place so I can plug in the lavalier. Where'd my lavalier go, guys? Is it on the floor? Nope, it is hanging by a thread over here. They're very lightweight, obviously. So this little guy has stereo lavalier. We plug that into your red button.
What would that cost?
This one, with the 32 gig card, was $97. And then this was another 20.
The one I had came with all of them.
Well, I'm glad this is
Similar-
a stereo.
similar. Yeah,
Yeah.
mine's stereo.
Well, I'm glad you found a really good deal.
No, I was just curious because, no, I've seen that one and I thought that was, but that one's far better. There actually has issues with sound. So
Right, this one has the best performance and was highly recommended by another for the mic who records a lot of things. Also, depending upon what goes on, what your ambient sound is like, when you have a guest coming in through a phone call, simply put the phone here on speaker and set the speaker, the recorder.
Does it have a pause button built in, easy
Yes.
access?
Yes, it does. It has a lot of cool things built into this one.
Looks like
And also, you want to have a backup to whatever you're recording with. You know, that table with the nice DVR and everything else in it? It was not cat proof, as we mentioned. And if you hit it just right, it'll pop the SIM card out of it. So that was a problem. Thankfully, we would always have another recorder sitting on the table, also plugged into the mix as another channel. We've had to use their backup a couple times to, rescue the episode that was so wonderful, right? I also will record on this Yeti, and it has an omnidirectional mic. I can set the mic to be just here, or surround. And depending upon what you're doing, if you're doing interview, you and I were talking, then I would set the dial for us to talk. If I'm doing a panel and I want to set it here and have everybody else talk, then I would set the dial to another setting.
I think that's on the back side.
Yeah, in the back. The front has a volume control and mute button. Mute's important if you want to, give instructions. That's a good thing. And then on the bottom,
Or throw your cat out.
wow, there he's gone. All right, so on the bottom, you have the USB connector that's going to go to your recording device. In this case, it's my Mac. And I put in a splitter on here. And then I have another little piece. I think I threw that back in the bucket to split one of these one more time. So I have three, one for me, 3 headphones, and then 2 guests. And this works pretty well.
So you're just splitting that so that they.
Mhm. Yep, and it's stereo.
Yep.
And then this gives you feedback of how your volume is going. And yeah, you'll see the different pictures. Let me switch the screen for just a minute. So I have all these lovely cables. So I can show you some of these pieces. I'm not going to go into great detail because we could do this for hours.
Oh, yeah, I love this.
Yes, do this for hours. So this is an example of black screen. Okay. Come on, you can do it. You did it before.
This is always the time when people have a PC, and they think, well, that's why I have it. My Mac always works.
Let's see.
You get that from Mac people all the time. I don't have that problem with my Mac.
No, of course not. I think you have the remotes in the back of the main thing. If you check the channel. I had it listening to me earlier, but
I'm not helping it, you see. There it is. Nope, there's the HDMI.
I think it's 2.
HDMI dose. Dose. That's 2, yeah. Hey.
It's 5.
Thank you. I just needed you to come help me. That's all. Thank you.
Mine's touch.
All right. So you
That's
recognize.
nice. Very nice.
You recognize headphones, right? Photoshop is my friend. This was a nice plain oak cabinet that got turned into turbos. And here, I've got different feeds, and then I have them, you can play them on the website. And this was an example of when I went to a book fair at the Women's Club, in the Women of Words. And I had 5 episodes from this one afternoon, because I had those 15-minute spots. And they would come sit, you could see the phone that I set up behind me, and we had the Yeti, and we had the headphones, and we were sitting in this kind of roar cocktail sounding room, big room, right? But at least around us it was quieter, so you could hear the voices. That was kind of fun. And these authors had no idea what the technology was, and they got to put on the headphones. It was so cool. So there's a certain, fun of bringing your stuff and plunking it down and saying, okay, let's talk. oh, can't take my picture, this is so cool. So that was very fun.
It does look cool.
Yeah. See if I can get some of these other ones. And these are simply posts that you can turn into another blog. So Dawn came to my studio, and you can see the curtains, all that, and I took a picture of her at the table and made it into a cover for this one. And these were the questions I asked her. I didn't transcribe the whole thing, I just put the questions on. So hopefully it would entice people to go listen. And then again, here's the MP3, and if you look behind the website, oh, you can't see it because it's behind the lectern here. Well, that's a little better, but, so there were 2 slices because she talked a long time. Episode part 1, part 2. And as you can see there, we had about, oh gosh, 25 or 30 episodes. And I'm going to be kicking this in again, revisiting the process, starting another website. This time it's going to be ichope.world. That's the next version instead of Communication Hero. And these will be more topics around conservation and conscious capitalism, things like that, or leadership issues.
This is a new website. You're done with this project?
This one is kind of dormant.
Oh, okay.
When I find someone that wants something more commercial that's around digital business or around app development, that's what Communication Hero is for. But I See Hope is more of a leadership, culture topic. So a lot of times you can have, like here, Communication Hero went across my lines of business, commercial-wise, right? That was fine. But I See Hope is a very different topic, very different attitude, different market, those pieces. Same technology, same concept. You just put it in a WordPress post. Okay. And then, let's get over here. Let's try this one. Pick a window. This one is Audacity. Very simple interface.
And again, what would a description of Audacity be? It's an editor for podcasts or what?
Audacity is an audio editor.
Okay.
Any kind of audio.
And converter. or-
Yeah, converter, things like that. I convert very strange files into MP3 files, and I can use different microphones. And I could get into this for a long time, but I don't think we have time to go through all of these pieces.
There's actually some really good YouTube on how to use Audacity. So it's very,
Yes.
it basically is anything on YouTube, but that's the good stuff on there. And you just type beginning Audacity, all that stuff.
Now this one's audio audition, so this one's also a very fun. Oh, that's right. Just never mind. And create your first podcast. So you can go into Adobe and it will walk you through step by step. This is not about step by step. This is about tips.
What is, does audio edition, is that all part of the suite or could you get it from home?
That's part of the suite. You gotta buy the whole kit and caboodle. So if you're into, I couldn't get everything to do what I want without having the suite. Because I use the Photoshop, I use InDesign for the business cards, I use Illustrator for the logo. You know, I use all the tools. So in this case, try something new. And if I'm feeding it into an app, that's another thing. Anyway, next step. Stream. We're going to move this, let's see, what do we want to look at? Do you want to see a slide for this? Everybody can just turn around and see what you're working on. How would you like to work on?
Well, I do have some slides.
Okay, oh, that's right, you did manage to sneak in the slides.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Would you like to describe your equipment?
Well, sure.
While
I mean,
I set this up?
this is my little literal actual computer, and this is something that we do frequently at TechMasters, where we'll actually record the meetings from the back, so that not only we can get a handle of what we're doing, while, you know, so you can, like, say, Mark gives a speech and he wants to go take a look at it, other than just the evaluation. Maybe he says, was it weird when I did this, or how I said that? How did the room respond when I told this joke, or something like that? You might want to check that out later. But also, if someone is saying, I don't know, this meeting 7:45 in the morning, I'm an IT guy. I don't get up until 9. I don't have to stroll in until 10:30 because I can get away with it, right? And so then
Which
maybe
IT guys are you talking to? And I want to talk to them to get their jobs.
exactly. So yeah, it's pretty typical in the IT world. I mean, I work with a couple of really good developers, and some days I'll be in at 7:30, some days I'll be in at 9, and no one seems to care. After TechMasters, I get there at 9:15. No one seems to care. But these two other guys, 10:30. Who knows? But they're also staying until 7. Maybe they're not married, they don't have any kids, so it's a different scenario. So, you might say to yourself, 7:45, that's rough. How can I get in there and everything? And then, so we have this webcasting live. So maybe you're going to check it out and you think, I want to be a part of that. I really enjoy what I see there, and I compare myself to those other IT people, and I think, I really don't have the communication and leadership skills. I want to check that out. Now, how do you do something like that? In case you're wondering, I decided to take screenshots. In all of my years of speaking at conferences and all the times I've been to conferences and see people do live stuff, I always see problems. So I don't like to do that if I can avoid it. So I took screenshots of going step by step on what to do. First off, when you go to YouTube, assuming your account is in good standing, if you've never used YouTube, you don't have a streaming channel, whatever it is, they actually give a 24-hour thing where you apply and then they go through to make sure you haven't been doing or uploading bad videos or whatever it is before they allow you to stream. Because maybe you want to upload videos that are copywritten or something like that, or inappropriate for children or something like that. But of course, that wasn't me, so I got approved. So anyway, you click here. Now you can do a couple things. A lot of times you've taken videos, you've done whatever it is, or I mentioned, you can upload it right then and there. You're good, awesome. I got to tell you, that's really time consuming, and that's what we started doing when we were first talking about uploading speeches and meetings to YouTube. People were taking the videos and then taking these giant, gigabyte videos, uploading them to YouTube, and that takes a long time. And editing them takes a long time. But they have a go live service, which is way easier. So I just do that. I'm not that committed to taking a whole, an hour or 15-minute video and editing it and uploading it for. By the way, I don't get paid to do this, so it's not really worth that to me. But it is worth it to do this. So click here and click go live. And what happens there? I wrote in the title for our event today, TechMasters After Dark Podcasting Tips and Techniques. Do whatever it is. Podcast, number 1. Here's our subtitle, whatever it is. You can make it public, private. Maybe you're still a little unsure. You kind of want to keep it private for now. Maybe you don't want it to be live. Maybe you're just doing a test run, whatever it is. And then you can also do it where it is public, but no one can find it. You have to give out a URL. Now, in this case, I want it to be public because I want people to see us. Hello to the 2 or 3 people who might be watching right now. I did tweet it, and I did retweet it on my personal account, so we'll see what happens. You can also say, when I started this one that we're on live right now, I started at like 5:58 or something. And so if you were to watch it after this, you would see me thinking around by myself, sitting here in the room alone for like 2 minutes before anybody piled in. Of course, I wasn't expecting anybody to jump on to the live stream within that first minute or 2. But whatever. You can say, I'm going to get my thing set up, and I'm not actually going to start my podcast for half an hour. So you can schedule it for that particular time. When you're done with that, there are a couple other minor options. Click next. Then it's actually going to, it has a little countdown, 3, 2, 1. Then it takes your picture. So, of course, my picture would normally just be me going, wait, what? Do they do what? But I had my little camera covered, so it's all great. Now, you can retake the thumbnail in case you weren't quite ready with your pause, maybe with your pose, maybe you couldn't make it in front of the room to do whatever. Or you can do what I actually did, which is to upload a custom thumbnail, which was the opening slide for this presentation today. And after you do that, you can edit a couple things. Oh no, I have a typo, whatever it is. Maybe you change this. You can change your category to education, whatever it is, sports, entertainment, anything like that. And the waiting part is if you were to make it start later and people were on now waiting for it to go, course, this was going to be live, so that number was there. Then click go live. Boom. So say you're live. So look good, right? Now then you click this button down here, the little sharing button. This will show you that your microphone is working. This is how you shut it off. Click that little sharing button, and it pops up a URL. You can paste that URL like I did to Twitter, and then or of course you can share it to Facebook, whatever it is on here. All these different things with just a little click of the button. But you can send that, and then that will give a URL to the live stream that's currently going. But when the live stream is done, it still works as an archive, just a normal YouTube video, as if you had uploaded it without any extra work. So you click end stream here. You can say I'm done editing, I'm good to go, or you want to edit it in the studio. Maybe you want to get rid of those first 2 minutes of me just sitting here in the room by myself. Maybe you want to add a little bit at the beginning for an introduction or some sort of outro, something like that, bumper music, anything like that, credits, something along those lines. Anything, maybe Lori was swearing, as she typically does, and you want to edit that part out, something along those lines. All right, then you click done, whatever it is you want to do, and maybe you wanted to edit it. You can do basic editing, you change the title, you want to add a description because you were just trying to hurry up and get that thing going. You realize oops, I put it in private mode, better set that to public, something along those lines. Advanced, there's a ton of other things, there are different kind of licensing, so you can figure out whether they're actually going to allow people to use that for their videos. Let's see, what else? Maybe you want to put a location of where you are, recording date, if any of that matters. Let's see, language for closed captioning, support, a bunch of different things. A lot of videos that might close comments if it's controversial or political or something like that. You might want to just cancel those comments. Live chat. Let's see, embedding. Sometimes people don't want to allow people to embed their videos in case it kind of looks like they're stealing your content. They want to say no, you have to come to our website, or you want to force them to go onto YouTube so you get ad revenue, that kind of thing, whatever it is. And notify your subscribers, that kind of thing. Bunch of interesting stuff. But that's it. I gotta tell you, it's really, really, really the easiest thing that when it comes to live streaming or something. I didn't expect it to be that easy, but it really is. So if you want to do a live podcast, or if you want to do something, you can do both. Where you can cast it live and then later on edit it. That is a really great choice. And of course, if it's timely, like you want to have people do it. Let's say you're going to. I had a friend who was live streaming the NFL draft and commenting on it and reacting to people who were chatting, things like that. That was a lot of fun too. So that's another good opportunity for that kind of thing. All right. With that, I think we're going to take a quick short break here, and go ahead and use the restroom instead of interrupting, and go ahead and eat, and we'll set up for the next portion of the presentation.
Excellent. So are we going to continue?
Yep.
Awesome. Very good.
So no more swearing, okay?
If you want me to go first before this.
Yes,
Oh, yes,
So I've
please.
got a question.
Fine.
I'll be back.
And I'm
How many
also
do you
gonna
need?
take a
You're
quick bathroom
streaming
break.
me and I didn't sign anything.
Yep, that's another thing that you can do, or you should do, is to either put up a sign when you're in a group setting that does not understand that. Like normally with our meetings, we would know that, and we're already saying, yes, of course, I wouldn't come here.
I don't have a problem with it.
Of
What
course.
I'm just saying is that
And
some
the other
people
thing
do
is,
though.
you let people know so that if they do have a problem, then you would take that down. One person, for example, gave a speech where he talked about something personal, and he said, after the meetings, take the video down. I don't, he was emotional about it when he was giving his presentation. And so, yeah, of course. Another person was he's working with a federal agency of some kind, and discussing sensitive data, sensitive material, and he said, I can't let you talk about this. or show that to
So
them.
then you took that down.
Yeah, and of course,
When
that
I
was,
say, you say take it down, you don't mean take it down after it went up, you're saying have it not go on.
in the latter case, we never recorded, because he let me know beforehand. In the former case, he kind of thought about it and said, you know, could you take that down? Of course, I would expect he did.
So you can do a live stream, but nobody can actually, unless you send out that URL, nobody actually can see it.
See, that's happening. They could be subscribed to you, or, you know, they could be looking up TechMasters After Dark, just happening to come across them. Or, again, like you said, I actually intentionally put that up so that people will see it.
Yeah, but you could actually intentionally live stream something, put it into the studio scene, and not actually have anybody see it.
I could, for example, the test one was private. You could see it was private. Nobody knew I was doing that.
So I could do a live stream, get it out on studio, and
Yep.
do it, get it done, take a look, see how it works without actually having to go through an editing studio and everything else. And throw it that way to get up to speed.
Yep.
I'm just thinking, quick ways to get up to speed without having to do everything.
And that's such a quick and easy way of doing it, to actually get it up there. But, you know, then that you could do that just to see if it looks good, and if you like what you saw, then make it public.
Yeah, exactly. But then can I take it down from there and edit it, or do I have to edit it up there?
Both. You can download all your own videos when you're on YouTube, but so you can do a bit more powerful stuff, or you can leave it up there and edit
There
it
you
there.
go.
Because I would say, if you're gonna do minor things, then leave it up on YouTube, but if you're gonna do something major,
Sure.
or a whole lot of
This
things,
would be a
bring it
2
down,
years.
edit it on your machine, it'll be a lot faster, and then put it back up when you're ready.
What do you typically use for editing?
How's that?
i5, 60 gig type thing?
You're welcome.
My machine is
No
i7,
worries. Oh, and would you like one of my
I
business
was
cards?
just saying, i5, i7, depends on what version of i7.
Yeah.
i5 yesterday is, i7 yesterday.
Yeah. I draw a hard line at i7, it has to be i7. Personally,
Everything good on the
Oh, we
show
have-
is better. I'm sorry?
I mean, when we're trying, I'm, it's
From a
something
video
that,
card, from a video card standpoint, do you think, supplementing with a video card makes a difference?
I have not noticed anything or felt the need.
Well,
Ryan, I think you've got one.
because, with
Would you like
anyways.
No, I know exactly where mine is. It's on the windowsill.
And I'm gonna, I've been building this stuff. So, no, I know what I have.
Nick, here's a form which discusses a bit about the club.
And
No,
to be honest, I don't game as much as I used to. And of course, I'm a programmer, so I kind of would like some bit more power.
I know, and I work on networks, so I was too that way, but again, you have what you have.
Something. You wanted, a certificate of needs for continuing education.
True.
I put her in this year's complaint.
Good idea.
Where are we, what time are we going to last Saturday?
8 p.m.
Oh, who's gonna table this?
For after yours,
Yeah.
that would just be you doing the interview process. And if you like, I can come up with something.
Okay, well, kind of see where it goes.
That was kind of like a mock interview, mock conversation, and you can ask any one of us, throw out a topic and then talk about it.
Okay,
Ask me, I'll help you do that.
all right, thank
No
you.
worries. Some questions?
The one I bought, which wasn't meant for podcasts.
I was trying to look at your digital, without being
Nothing
too
like that.
unruly, I was trying to look at the digital device.
Oh, okay.
But I was getting a lot of lag, so I hit the search and I put the phone down and figured I'd look later.
I wanted to mention, when I'm webcasting, now Lori has this fancy
Yeti.
Yeti. Must be the same company, actually. I actually have a snowball in the back here attached to my computer working right now. And snowball, based on the things you were telling me here, this has specifically say what kind of thing, whereas snowball is intentional for group. So the snowball is, it would be intended for you're not, it's not one person, it's not meant
Oh,
to
that's true.
cancel out, the other stuff, and it's really soft in the way distant, it could easily be canceled out.
It is.
But when it comes to, a few people, maybe
Yeah, no,
one
so
person here, another
there's
person over
basically
here,
two.
and a few more feet away, the
general
snowball is
things that
meant
we
to
do
be
in
able
each
to
meeting.
pick up on
One is
that
prepared
and kind of
speeches
bounce
where
them
someone
out.
gets a chance
And
to
the
get
idea
up and
would
talk,
be
to get
maybe for a
speaking,
band,
public speaking.
you're
Yeah.
sitting
And
in
the other is
queue,
impromptu
you
speaking.
mark,
So you
or
just
with a
answer
collection of
question
people, and
in
in a
front of
Toastmasters
everybody, kinda
setting,
get up
we have more than one
in
person.
front of people.
Maybe something like this, where you're headed, where you're intentionally trying to hear,
That's already
would,
practiced.
this would be better.
And then
And,
there's, it starts.
but in general,
with a
both very high
short
quality.
business meeting.
The only,
Just
the
general
major difference here is that this is, and I'm mentioning for the purpose of our meeting, they're cool, but
We're gonna do this,
much
anybody
more.
volunteer for this
This one
conference?
works really well
Things like
for
that there.
any recording of
Yeah,
the
yeah,
video.
Yeah. And
Did you want to take a picture?
Yeah, every Tuesday at 7:45.
It's a stereo recorder in black, so
Yeah, me
that's.
right here. Well, not here in this room, but here in this room. The room here just upstairs.
So you said.
Yeah, this has got a 32 gig card in it.
So that's fine. I'll look, but it's, yeah, so many.
Yeah, well, it's fair, it's open to anybody that wants to join.
Oh.
It's just that the people.
Funny
that
part is,
are
I'm
not
not using it.
Because
Like,
like, for example,
hone in
I'll
on
do a conference,
So
there's
I'm
no
gonna
practice.
class.
And everyone in the audience is gonna know what it means.
You can find a topic you can look.
Yeah, yeah. Well, it's not like Don,
Topic.
she works for Catco.
Which one topic?
Vince is a developer. Lori's in the digital space, but she's not a developer. So there's a lot of people do different things. You don't have to, but. Oh, yeah, right on, man. Yeah, cool.
Are you coming back soon? We're about to start. Okay.
a few minutes over right now, so I'm gonna kick it off. All right, now, let's see, we're working at part 4, I guess, say, of our meeting here. We're going to turn it over to Mark Kalal, who's gonna talk about interviews, conversations, and setup, applying and speaking tips to podcasts. Please help me welcome Mark.
Thank you, Vince. Very good. Good evening, everyone. So before we get on with it, I'd just like to share a quick story just to kick things off and laugh. And speaking of conversations, very recently, my wife, she came up to me, she just got right in my face. And she says, "You haven't heard a word I said, have you?" I thought that was an odd way to start a conversation. Thank you, Larry. Thank you.
You should have bruises for that.
To be fair, I asked her about that. I said, "Is that funny?" Because she's kind of a litmus test, and she said, "Yeah, that's funny."
I'm still over the fence looking for the ball.
Huh? Okay, well, anyways, carry on then. So, we heard from Lori, who went through a variety of topics on podcasting and how it works. And both Vince and Lori delivered some information on how to get the message out there in distribution. What I'm going to talk about is how to deliver that message and what to do. And there's a variety of strategies and techniques and just awareness points really that you can use to keep your conversations energized, your interviews captivating, and boxed up and make it shine. So, to begin with, I feel I'm a fairly good conversationalist. Would you think you are a fairly good conversationalist as well?
Yes.
Yeah, so would I. And most of us are probably better than we think we are. And that's really the point in podcasting when you're dealing with this invisible audience. And one of the major things is to make it feel very casual, natural, and welcoming. So people are going to want to listen to it. And one approach is to think of having a podcast conversation as though you're just sitting down to have lunch with one of your friends. Very casual. But that's not always easy. There's some people like me that sometimes that connection that you want with people can be very easy. Like, I've talked to you for 5 minutes and I feel I've known you all my life. Other times you need a bit of a jump start. And there's a variety of techniques for getting that jump start. Obviously, small talk, trying to get to know somebody, finding common ground is a great way to do that. Just ways to break the ice and push it forward. But any type of commonalities is a good way to further that engagement as well. Sports tends to be very popular, current events, just things that people would have an opinion on. And of course, asking someone to talk about themselves is always a very popular thing to do. People like to talk about themselves in a way to keep the conversation flowing and engaged. And the tone too, again, with that invisible audience, it's difficult to know how you're being received, but there are some things that are pretty much universal. I want to do a thought experiment. So if you please, if you can bow your heads, close your eyes, but don't pay attention. I'm going to read something twice. I'm going to change something, and I want you to see if you can identify it. Are you ready? Here it comes. Our guest today is a distinguished author who came all the way from Alabama with a banjo on his knee. Please welcome Nick. Second time. Our guest today is a distinguished author who came all the way from Alabama with a banjo on his knee. Please welcome Nick. Did you hear what I did the second time? All I did was smile. I was kind of excited, so I guess I smiled a bit both times. But I really tried to emphasize the energy so it comes through. And it does come through. Don't you agree?
You also added the word very the first time, the second time.
Did I not?
Yes.
Dang it. Let's rewind that. I'm going to edit that out. Very good.
Well, you told me to listen.
Very well. Okay, previews. Instead of conversations where a question and answer is more engaged, sometimes you want that to be very one-sided. I'm interested in hearing what someone thinks and keeping you focused on that person. More of an interview. This is a similar topic, but questions is a very important part of that. What questions that you ask? It's an interview, not an interrogation, right? So there's lots of ways that you use to formulate those questions. And one way I think is good where you can ask it in a flattering way that makes someone want to answer the question. So for example, my friend Brian, he's in software just like I am. If I was interviewing Brian, I might ask him, say Brian, that latest enhancement that you added to that reporting application, that was very, very clever. I'd love to hear the story behind that one. He's probably going to be very happy about answering that. I'll get a very good response too. There's other areas where maybe you don't know how to follow up. I find myself in this position all the time. One of our other colleagues, Mike, he's a brilliant tech worker, and he'll go on about cloud computing and all these fancy acronyms and esoteric term here and there. You can package it all up and deliver it as a service. Deliver as a service. Just by saying the last few words of that sentence, I can pose it as a question. He can give me clarification, elaborate, provide other details. I kind of throw the ball back into his court and we carry on the dialogue. And of course, stories are a very important way to do that too. You can get talking through stories and get the point across, and that's a much deeper way to connect, especially when emotions are involved. That's a very powerful way to connect with people too. Right? And lastly, make it sure. There's a quote that I'm fond of. I don't know who said it originally, but it goes something like this. There never has been nor will there be another you in the history of communication. So what that means is the way you present, your vocabulary, just everything about you is very unique. So use that. Figure out what makes you work and discover your own voice. And applying speaking skills is something that we're doing right now. Because after all, a podcast is speaking, the better speaker you are, the better you're going to do that. And that's what we learn in TechMasters all the time. There's a variety of topics that we practice and you can get good at. So trigger words like I've just done with ahs and ums and making sure you don't use too many of those, or adjusting your vocal variety. So if I want to demonstrate something in an excited manner, I might raise my voice and speak a bit higher. And if it's more solemn, I may lower my voice. Or a great technique to grab someone's attention, make a really great point. Softly. That's a great point too. Right? And clarity, polish. Vince made a good point, as did Lori, about do you prepare more? Do you edit? What's the balance there and how do you factor that in? That's a good question. I'm not sure I have a great answer for that one. There was an interview I read with Larry King, who was a very good interviewer, and he made mention that he never prepares for interviews. He just does them. And the reason is he wants it to be organic and spontaneous. And from the looks of him, he's been doing it for about 100 years. Maybe he can do that. So it might be a point where I've got a lot of ums and ahs, so I might edit that up. I'm going to leave some in because it'll take forever if I do that, and I want it to sound somewhat natural. So at your own leisure, I guess. And carry on. So conversations, again, it's a two-way street. Everyone takes turns listening and sharing and keeping that flow going. Feel the conversation build. And then lastly, entertaining. There's a couple podcasts that my colleague had recommended. They're very interesting, the McKellar brothers. I've heard a couple, they're a little on the adult side, but they're very, very funny. Humor is a great way to be entertained as well. And with that, we'll wrap it up. So call to action is, we'll get a chance to practice this as we go through it. So, thank you.
Now we'll do some table. Let's see, what time do we have? It's 7:15. And we can practice some table topics if you want, or go straight to the panel. I think we have time for table topics. Since we want to price our panel at 7:30, and I can do this.
Sure.
Yes.
Great.
All right. Very good. Thank you. That's one of the things with TechMasters. We're very flexible. Yay. And we have officers. We have people who fill roles. We have a very nice flowing schedule. That's why we have our agendas and time in our slides, so we try to keep it on pace. And one of our featured things we like to do is table topics. That gives everyone a chance to do impromptu speaking. It's 1 to maybe 2 minute talk, and you're given a question, and you get to stand up and answer the question. Similar to podcasting, I would always provide a set of questions for the people I interviewed. However, it would go off the rails sometimes. There'd be follow-up questions, there'd be, turns in a different direction. What do? You get stopped in the hallway or in the elevator, and someone says, "What about that? Is that ever going to be done?" Okay, what do I say? I have 2 minutes with the CEO. That's why you go practice. And when you're doing interviews for a job, then impromptu helps, because you're not always going to know the questions in advance. That's why we love to do it. Now, the podcasting, we're talking about interviews, conversations, and setups. Setups are the leading question. I was doing that to poor Donna, and she didn't know it was coming. Leading question. What's the name of that Facebook group again? Donna, would you like to do a table topic about podcasting? Please join us right now. Right now. You're welcome. Sorry. I was not aware of that. Sorry. The question,
Yes.
is, I want to give you a leading question. You get to tell me all about it for a minute and a half. The question is, Donna, I heard that you have this home-based business, and you've done these before. How does that home-based business idea work now in this whole high-tech universe with people with crazy lifestyles? What do we do?
Such an interesting thought you have, Lori. With life as we know it right now, with podcasting and Facebook and Instagram and Facebook Live and digital. It is a real learning experience for someone that has several decades of history. I grew up in the direct sales business, always meeting face to face. The sales techniques that I used were deliberate, and they were always face to face. Now I have to relearn through, relearning through TechMasters and relearning through very young people who don't have as much experience as I have face to face, but they are a whiz at this kind of thing. My purpose here is to really learn how to do a Facebook Live. So I could say, look at these nails. My hands look old because they are, but they look less old if I have color on them. Yeah, how do you like that?
That's.
Somebody prepped.
I didn't, I'm in the midst of a manicure. That is my answer to your wonderful question, Lori.
Thank you.
I'm hearing thumbs up.
Very good.
All right. Normally, we hold up cards for the time, but since we're doing something informal, are you timing?
I did. That was 1:33. Right in the middle of the Parker.
I was trying to look for a timer on my head, but I'm glad you had one. Yeah, that's it.
Loris, are you up for a question?
Sure,
We're having a podcast,
yes,
and we're doing an interview.
yes.
Loris, I hear that you're very active and you go to some really interesting conferences. What was the most recent conference you went to, and what was it that you spoke about?
Madam Topic Master, the most recent conference that I went to was out in Washington DC about 2 weeks ago at Numbers USA. Numbers USA would be a controversial group. They're slow, they are out to promote lower immigration to the US. And the bulk of the people that were there had environmental or conservation backgrounds because wildlife and wildlands around the world and here in the US have problems. Do we want wildlands and wildlife for the future? The conference was again at Numbers USA. And again, the people were from the East Coast, the Midwest. And I find it interesting to go to such things. I'm around other people that feel like me, and it's fun to be in a group where there is synergy. I had an opportunity to present briefly at the conference that I was at. The people in Washington, D.C. refer to myself. I founded a group called Population Coalition. There's 2 others, people that work with me. We go around doing presentations occasionally at things like May Day in Powderhorn Park. We're going to Veg Fest in St. Paul. Out in Washington, D.C., they refer to us as the Minnesota trifecta. So being involved, going to conferences, pursuing a passion is really something that I'm into now, Tabletop Master.
Thank you, Loris. What was the time on that one?
1:28.
Awesome. You guys are on a roll. Very good. Do any of our guests, would you like to answer a question?
I like those two.
Come on, you Kim, are you interested? You want to try one?
Sure.
All right. Okay, stand up. Now give me your question. So in the interest of our topic, interviews, conversations, and setups, we just did a setup and an interview question. We're going to have a conversation. Okay? So we're going to pretend we have our cup of favorite beverage. We have a microphone between us, and we're doing a podcast. Okay? And the topic today is careers that can use Spanish as a second language. So Kim, how many students do you teach at Shakopee High School?
I have about 200 students every semester.
Wow, 200 students. That's awesome. And do they have, like, how many classes do they take for competency in Spanish?
We have 5 levels. 2 of them are college levels that are taught in high school.
Nice. When your students graduate, they go on to college. What have you heard from them as they come back and talk to you? Where have they used their Spanish speaking ability in a career?
That is a good question. They usually come back and tell us where they placed in the university levels. And then after that, once they get into their careers, we don't get to see them as much anymore. So, to be honest with you, I can't answer that question in terms of their career. I can only answer it in terms of where they place in the universities.
I would guess you're a good Spanish speaker yourself.
I try to be.
Good. Well, over beverage of choice at the bar, you can tell me the rest of that stuff. But let's say you were going to go find another career. You speak Spanish really well, you're educated, you know how to wrangle high school students, that translates well to corporate. What careers would you pursue that you could leverage that skill?
I would think this skill would be very applicable in the social services field. So that branches out to a lot of different fields, but like even in the medical fields, they need people that are bilingual anywhere where they, Shakopee itself, the town is very bilingual, so any kind of position in a town such as Shakopee that is bilingual
That's really cool. It reminds me of a story when I worked at the University of Minnesota at the police department as their IT manager. There was a whole another world at the U of M I was not aware of, and it was campus security. And these are students who do, oh, I'm going to sit at the museum and be the door guard. Where the blue light goes on, I'm going to go find out what's going on. And they would have a whole database of what languages these students knew. Because they would get into a situation and they need a translator at a university. Very much a differentiator. You could, outperform another candidate if you had a second language. So that might be something cool we could talk about later. Sounds like a whole nother podcast, right? Thank you, Kim. Now, normally in a conversation, Kim and I would have a talk before we had a talk. And we'd be able to know more about going back and forth. So you would ask me questions, not just me asking you questions. That's more interview, but we would go back and forth. You know that kid, Lindsay? You never know it, but she uses her Spanish speaking for architecture, for law, and for everything else because she couldn't make up her mind as a major. So she would go out, try to find a job, not find one, go back to school, and then go back out again. So the language was the common denominator besides all these other degrees. Very fun stuff. And at that point, I believe we are good. How long did we talk?
247.
247. So it was a little longer. Conversations
good.
are a lot of fun, but they will go longer, hopefully. And that's where, like my brother and me, it's like a running conversation with those guys. But they're all stand-up comedians, so it's hilarious. All right, at this point, let's go to our panel. You guys have been percolating with questions. So Vince, come on in.
All right.
Claire, come on. And you can stand.
Good.
See, we're used to speaking standing up. Now, when you're podcasting, you don't have to stand up. You can sit down and podcast. A lot of times in public speaking, it's body language. And also waving your arms without getting marked in the face. We'll have different techniques. Tim, you have been percolating with questions. I can just see it. Do you have a question?
Just trying to think. I've had quite a few. Just trying to think.
Which one?
Well, in the meantime, we do have
Getting
advice.
started advice. That'll give you time to ponder which ones you want. Yes.
So, of course, you had definitely mentioned that you need to have some kind of topic. It should be something that is going to either attract an audience or somehow convert to something that's going to generate some kind of revenue. You have to have some kind of purpose for what it is. And of course, a topic. What is your podcast going to be about? If it's just your life, probably not going to be that interesting. No offense, but probably not going to be that interesting. You're probably going to have some kind of overarching theme or topic that people would want to come to get expert opinion on that kind of thing. And for example, when it came to mine, although I do think that maybe I'm better at some things than football knowledge, I do think that I'm quite highly knowledgeable at football. And when it came to people discussing making a podcast for our subreddit has many thousands of people that are subscribed to it. And when people were thinking about putting it together, they're like, hey, wait a second. The number 2 moderator has been a Toastmaster for over a decade. I bet he'd be a good speaker. And of course, I argue a lot on this sub, and I have a lot of opinion, and I think I fought with football pretty well, so I think I converse pretty well on that. Make sure that you have, you said things like choosing the best partners, and a lot of times, maybe the best partners are extremely knowledgeable. There are people who, we actually have people who write sports columns, actually write football articles for, and get paid to do that are on there as well. They can be really good, but also maybe their personality or their voice isn't very good. You can have them on in order to have that expert knowledge, the expert opinion, those statistics that just roll off their tongue. But at the same time, you might want to say things like, hey, could you speak with a little more energy? Pull them aside a little bit. Or maybe keep them off to the side and only have them speak for a little bit, or bring them aboard for a small segment or something. Also, you don't want to have let's say someone's a really good speaker. Maybe they recognize that and they try to dominate. They try to take control of it. You're even gonna want to pull them aside, like, hey, Donna, you may be really, really interesting here. Maybe you're the star of the show, but you can't speak for 90% of the thing, right? We need to figure out when if somebody's talking too much or taking over. If you yourself are the one doing that, just bite your tongue a little bit. Or at the very least, if 4 people want to talk about a subject, be last. Then, if you are going on too long, then we might cut, the whole group might cut you off, which is good because you don't need to be talking about every single solitary thing for quite so long. So a few different things when you're getting started. Definitely make sure you have a reason, a compelling reason that will actually bring people in, some sort of way to bring people in, not just the podcast itself, but we get these thousands of people on the subreddit, and we get to put a post on the subreddit, and we're moderators, so we get to sticky it to the top so that a bunch of people see it. So that's why we've had 1,800 downloads of our 22 episodes of just people shooting around, shooting the breeze, talking about football. So that's pretty easy. We haven't had to advertise or do anything. We haven't had to pay any money or anything like that. So it's pretty good built-in, audience. But make sure you have a way to get an audience of some kind. Whether it's, hopefully you have a good social media network, or you're already partnering with somebody who has good outreach for whatever way it is. Some sort of reciprocity thing, like Lori was mentioning earlier, something like that. So make sure you have a team. Make sure you have good people that can contribute. You're doing a good job with, making sure things are balanced, and that you have good differing opinions, things like that. A good way to get outreach and do something. She had talked a lot about when you're getting started. Start from step 1. You definitely want to do things like intros, outros, and because we've done a couple where it seems like a lot of the other people aren't really cognizant of these things. They just want to start talking. Like, well, here's the beginning of the podcast. Hey, the draft was yesterday. What do you think? No, you should have. Hey, so our podcast is called Football the Podcast. That might sound a little boring, but the acronym is FTP. And if you're a football fan and you're a Vikings fan, that might mean something to you. Very funny. I chose the acronym myself, and then I chose what it would mean. As in Football the Podcast. If you can't figure out what it is, I can't tell you. I'm not going to say it. We don't want to get in trouble. We said no swearing. But anyway, it's very funny, and I made sure that the artwork had shown the acronym so that we could. So it's an inside joke. But anyway, so it's called Football the Podcast, and I suggest that we have an intro like, welcome to another exciting episode of Football the Podcast. Here with me are an illustrious panel of power users from the Vikings subreddit. Tell me your names, everybody. And then they say their names and everything. And then we try to talk about things beforehand about how are we gonna break this down. Sometimes we do it differently. Like, let's say if it's the draft, it's very easy. Go pick by pick, and we just discuss the pros, cons, whatever. And then there are other times where we say let's say we got 5 people. We tell everybody beforehand, pick one topic you want to discuss, and then you kind of own the floor for a minute, right?
So what is the duration of your podcast?
It's at least an hour.
An hour, and you have how many guests?
3 to 6.
3 to 6?
There's a collection of people, and if it's supposed to be something like after a game, you don't want to wait 3 weeks after a game because we're going to have another game in a week. So we try to do it that night. Not everyone's available, so it shifts. Sometimes we'll have these 4 people, sometimes it'll be these 3 people, and it kind of mixes and matches. But anywhere from like 3 to 6.
What's the logistics? Does everybody have to be on site? Do you do it remotely on the phone?
Everything's remote. The guy who does all the recording that uses literally almost the exact same stuff that Lori does is in Duluth. We have people from New York, like people that moved out, and it's hard to be part of the community, and they're really excited about being involved in Vikings football. And they're like, yes, I definitely want to do this. And they're the number 1 moderator on the subreddit is actually in Texas. So he's on there a lot, and so we're all over the place.
Cool. Excellent.
So how many people you said you're on it, and so how many people are really on the panel of your podcast?
So it averages at 3 to 6, but there's a collection of like a dozen people, and whoever can make it at a particular time is whoever's on.
And then are you the moderator, or who's the moderator of it then? Do you have it change out from,
Yeah, we definitely try to make it more of a community things. So for example, when we go with the idea of everybody pick a topic, you're kind of the moderator for that one topic, right? Otherwise, it would be the guy who does most of the recording. You got a terrible voice. Sorry, Christian.
So,
All right. We're gonna follow our format, and we're gonna go across, and then we're gonna open it up.
Sure.
Right?
Yep.
All right. Getting started advice. Simon said in his book, Find Your Why. And that's also your personal development why, and it can also be the theme of your podcast. That would be an interesting starting point. And then also social equity. That is the term for the depth and breadth of your social network through social media. And if you're starting a business, or you're doing marketing, or you're doing blockchain, whatever it is, social equity is what's going to make it or break it. You had great social equity with a Reddit channel that already had followers. You're building your followers on Facebook. You're going to start building your followers. You have built in 200 students every year to start your social equity, and they know people. And they have moms and dads who know people. So this would be a great way to start a podcast. It could go like wildfire, English and Spanish, right? And the other getting started advice is just start, do it. And it could be very simply, all right, I know 101 recipes for pie. And I'll just start with recipe number 1 and tell you how to make it. And that could be the podcast. I drove Lyft for a while, and one of the most favorite topics was pie crust. You know how many ways there are to make pie crust? And we would trade recipes and pie crust tips. Secret, coconut oil. Thinnest pie crust, highest temperature. So whatever it is that you are passionate about, that's what you get started with. The technology, I believe, is something you learn and you fuse into your makeup, and it's like using the phone after a certain point. You're not going to worry about it. Yeah, when you get started, you're going to set it up, but it's what you're saying and who you're talking to. That's the most important. That's my getting started advice.
I can spell podcast. I haven't done a thing, but there is a couple things I can comment on, so thank you for that setup. So to begin with, the way you speak, the way you talk, the way you relate to people, I think that's extremely important in how you come across in this invisible audience. And I will second the notion, I'm a developer, and anyone in technology, I want to start a blog. My first instinct is to write blog software. You don't need to do that. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Use the tools that are there. That'd be my advice as well.
Great. Now we're open for questions.
Younger people seem like they have determined the culture of the world, and it's been going on for years. And by younger people, I'd say under 40. And I would like to know, I'm not just sure how widespread podcasting really is. If you surveyed people under 40, how many people would have heard of podcast in the previous year? How big is podcasting?
Well, I would say heard of all of us.
Yes.
Is heard of it.
Yeah.
As far as who is having a podcast, would be very few people, but who is downloading and listening to them regularly, a really high percentage. I wouldn't know. I think technical people would do it a little bit more, just because we're into. I mean, I have my phone and I've got podcasting software for easily downloading and subscribing to these different things. And I can go search on different topics and say boom, 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 and all of a sudden I'm subscribed. And when I'm in my car, I listen to podcasts. I don't listen to the radio.
Okay. In April 2019, 700,000 shows, 29 million episodes that are going on right now.
Active,
Active.
700,000
Mm-hmm.
podcast channels.
Shows, yeah, 29 million episodes. That's huge. And, you know, people will be listening to podcasts all the time. There are more men that listen to podcasts, and it's 37 years old is the average age.
Just under 40.
Just right.
So, 37-year-old male is the average podcast.
Yes.
stop doing that, I'll catch thumbs up. Just saying.
Now, this is non-violent, no swearing, this is public consumption.
It
right?
was non-violent. I will do it with an invisible knife.
But anyway, Does that answer your question, Laura?
Somewhat,
There, if you can go out to the internet,
Find
and there are more statistics for that. That's where those infographics come in.
Okay.
There's a bunch of
And
that.
I think it sounded to me like maybe you're thinking it's kind of a blossoming, exploding thing. And I would say that I've definitely known podcasting for an extremely long time, more than a decade.
Mhm.
It may not have been as big, obviously, because it's definitely going to continue to get bigger, but I think that it's been very well known for quite some time.
And again, it's repositioning something that was already there. Radio shows,
Mhm.
audiobooks, webinars, those are all the same kind of platform. They're not packaged as a podcast. It's like Twitter repackaged texting and position.
And you could think of, not all podcasts are the same kind of thing. I've listened to podcasts that were actually just books being read. LibriVox.org is what I like to listen to, so I can, if I'm doing yard work or in the car, I can actually listen to, recently I listened to Cleopatra, the book being read, and so it could be a book as opposed to some kind of something that just happened, like talking about the latest Vikings game or the draft or something like that. Also news, literally somebody giving a news show where they're going through their news sources and giving their own take on it as opposed to maybe a more corporate news show.
Thank you. Right.
In the world of broadcasting, you know, like whether you're a newscaster or you're a radio personality, a lot of emphasis sometimes is placed on developing a technique where you're developing your voice into something that's appeals to a wide audience. I'm just curious if there are any techniques that you've come across, or any books or any podcasts about things that you can do with your voice that might improve your listenership.
There's a whole another world of voice acting and voice presentation and voice overs and things like that.
Mhm.
You could have a whole podcast just on that and invite the people who do this for a living. You go to any science fiction convention or anime convention, there are voice acting personalities that come to those. Oh, big fandom. So yes, you could do a lot of that. We touch on it with vocal variety.
I was wondering if there's like, do you know of any techniques? Have you come across any in your efforts to learn about
Do you
podcasts?
have something you'd like to
The way I would say it, I think you were starting to say it, is that at TechMasters, Toastmasters in general, we focus a lot on that. I don't know if how my voice comes across right now in my current stage of things, but it is a lot better than the way I normally am or the way I want to be. I want to speak way too fast, and I have been consciously slowing down for over a decade, and people still tell me I speak way too fast, especially if I'm getting excited about something or if I start to forget.
Well, we just need more coffee and we'll keep up with you. It'll be fine.
And, I have a little bit of a list, and there are just a few things where I've trained myself to enunciate better, because I slur a lot of words together, because, hey, I have the words in my head, I spit them out, you figure it out. I took the time to process all those words and get them out. It should be a lot easier to hear them and put them all together. That's the way my brain works. But I've been trained for so long to speak more slowly, to enunciate a lot better, make sure that I'm clear and project myself a lot better. And I thought I did a pretty good job of making a fake radio voice when I do the podcast intros. Welcome to another exciting edition of
You
podcast.
see, that's performance. That's theater.
And I think I did hear one
Yes.
thing, and I'm not going to actually advise this, but somebody, Nat King Cole, always wanted to have a really silky voice, and what he thought of before we kind of knew it was a bad idea was to make sure that he smoked a lot. And there are a lot of people on the radio with great voices, and they're like, "Yeah, I have to quit smoking because the doctor told me." Like, they're different things, but I can't think of a physical thing to do other than consciously thinking about it, hearing yourself, listening to yourself, and saying, I should slow down. I should enunciate better. I should speak more clearly and more loudly.
So the answer is nothing in particular. There's a lot out there. And again, TechMasters is getting you through a program of online instruction from Toastmasters and practicing to be confident and comfortable, and the direction you take it is up to you. We have people who are really into improv in our group. Remember that? And that is a little bit more performance. There's also creative expression and tall tales. We have a tall tales competition every once in a while too, and that's much more performance. Did you have anything you want to add?
Yeah. So to begin with, like we're doing now, the first time I recorded myself and played it back, it was such an eye opener. I may have a preconceived notion as to how you came across, and you watch yourself, it's almost cringe-worthy. So I think that it kind of sorts itself out, where you hear certain things, and I remember what I meant to say or meant to do was this, but what I heard myself say and do was this, and I don't know why I did that. So it's kind of something that you just sort of figure out on your own, I guess.
The other thing is you don't recognize your voice. First time I heard myself recording, I didn't recognize it was me.
Yeah.
It was like, oh my God, it's me. I had no idea.
Yes. I understand that completely. I've been doing voiceover since 4th grade.
Really?
Yes. It sounds very different when you're in the gymnasium and you hear your voice over the speakers over a slideshow. Whoa, what is that?
Remember as kids calling into fans, fans,
Other questions?
Yeah, I actually had a question regarding, so you decided you decided your, specifically your topic, and then you want to get people on, because you just don't want you pontificating on your soapbox. And, which is fun, and I enjoy it very much, but there's a certain point where people are gonna turn it off. You actually need interaction. So, what's the best way, for me, I mean, when I look at podcasts, I look at having two people, at least two people that interact with two different points of view, seem to play off each other well, and can just sort of hold their own when they have it without guests. So the two questions are, one is how to get guests, the other two is maybe you're trying to get a partner, somebody to do this with. Are there avenues or approaches that you would suggest on how to do such a thing?
Well, I think you've alluded to a few different things, and we've discussed different kinds of podcasting as well. If you're doing more of a news broadcast, it's going to be much more one person. And then the ones that I've heard that seem to be successful are, yeah, sure, the one person's going over the news, but they have to have interviews. So a news story comes out, something big happens, they go and they reach out to that person and say, hey, you want to tell your story on my radio show? So they talk about the news for an hour, then they interview someone for an hour. Then there's the banter back and forth, point counterpoint, where maybe two people would be better. Then there's the group where we're all talking football, and there isn't necessarily a point counterpoint, but we all have our own opinions and our own ideas and our own things that we want to discuss, and that's just a group of people. And we don't need to have guest stars or interviews or anything because there's 5 of us. Then, what Lori's doing, can you explain that a little better?
Yes. What I do is I ask people, or I go to an event. For example, I have a network on LinkedIn, and I can say, well, this month, I really want to zoom in on alternative energy. Who out there has an invested interest in alternative energy? Please give me a call, contact me, and we'll talk, because I have a podcast, I have 4 slots to fill. And that will get people to call me back, or email me, text me, whatever. So ask me. The other part is to go to an event, like the authored book fair. I called up the gal who was organizing that and said, hey, if you'll give me a booth, I will give away 15-minute podcasts for that. And she thought that was a great deal. So I didn't have to pay for the booth. I showed up with my kit, and then I did cross promotion to all these authors. So I did 15 authors.
So when you give away 50-minute podcasts, you basically do an interview with them, and then you give them the MP3, is it basically what you're
Yes.
saying?
Yeah, well, the MP3 is on my website. I give them the link to it. So they didn't have to have the equipment. They didn't have to have the account on iTunes. They didn't have to have the website. I put it on my website with their
And they
picture,
should download it.
and they could link to it and have something on their website or in their social media saying, hey, I was on Communication Hero Radio. Go check me out. Episode number 17.
So you
And-
would actually give them the MP3.
If they wanted the MP3 that was separate, like the whole recording without the intro and outro, they could pay for that.
Okay. I was just curious.
Right. So it was a free link, and then a couple of them actually contracted me at that point to do more recording for them and set up their own for episodes on their own website. They weren't broadcasting it on a feed for podcast
No,
distribution.
I understand,
Yeah.
but I was just curious how you were using it. It was-
Right. So in that case, going to an event and just having casual traffic. I've had people stop me at a caribou saying, "What are you doing?" As I'm editing, a podcast or something. I'm sitting there with headphones on. "Ooh, can I try that?" And we sit down and have a podcast. So
It's fun.
you can do this anywhere.
Podcast about podcast.
I know, it's a lot of fun. So for me, it's asking. And I'll go to the sewer co-op and I'll find an interesting person and really, what do? Do you do podcasts? Well, I'm trying to start a podcast. So we exchange episodes. I'll be on her podcast and she'll be on mine.
No, I had a quick question on that. You said, you go to particular events and you're kind of putting out feelers. Hey, does anybody want to reach out? Have you ever looked into who are the experts that you might be able to reach out to and then ask someone almost out of the blue?
Yes, that's where the reference section at the back of books are really, really good to have. So you go through and call the people. A lot of times, if they have a website, they're technical enough and secure enough in their expertise that I can contact them and they've been on radio shows before and so forth.
And I would think that some of these people, especially when you're talking about activism, they might be very interested in helping get the word out.
Yes, yes.
So even if they're a big name or they're kind of famous, or you saw them on TV, or they have a book, they might still say yes to nobody you because they realize that you could help get the word out.
A quick question, then, well, it's not a quick question, actually, but here's the deal. So, this is all good and dandy, you already have a podcast, you have this all set up. It's wonderful, but I don't have any of this. I mean, I might have the equipment and I may have the savvy to put it all together, that's beside the point, but I don't have a podcast set up. And so I come to you and say, let's do a podcast. By the way, I have nothing. I mean, or at least I have the ability to do it, but I don't, honestly, and I would like to do a podcast, start it out. What's your advice?
Write it down. Treat it like a meeting. Have an agenda. It's an event. And you're going to record the event. Now, the event is recorded. You've had your interaction. You've got the MP3 in the can. Now, you listen to it and see, is this worthy? Do I want to make a podcast out of this? You can do samplers and invite different people until something really gets you excited, right? You don't have to publish it. But I would say, try it until you find the thing that clicks. And then just keep doing it. Like as soon as I started the digital hero, communication hero stuff, they wouldn't let me stop. All my friends kept calling me, I'm next, right? So as you build it up, that's great. Now, again, to get started from scratch is project management, marketing, website publishing, those pieces. And that's where you find a partner. Find someone who's organized, all those things, and hadn't even thought about recording anything. But you can be, the producer and the production person and be the co-host, right? And even if your other person who's organized and can call people, like in my family, I'm the one that's the extrovert. I don't know how I ended up being the only extrovert in my family, right? I'm the one that can go ask for a straw and give it to someone else. Everyone else would just say, oh, sorry about it, right? So I co-hosted with a production person who knew one mic from another mic. Yes, I do too. I did AV for many, many years, but that was his gig. So he would do that part, and I would let him talk occasionally, but not always, because he would run it right off the rails. So he knew he'd do that. So we were a good combination.
You have to, be a gatekeeper at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Part of being the moderator, right?
Yeah, I understand.
I see a little difference between doing a radio talk show and doing what you're doing. It seems like there's a lot of similarities between the two. That's just an observation.
And that's a different kind of show, right?
Yeah.
When you're thinking about it as a talk show where you're the host and you bring on people to discuss things that are kind of relevant to whatever it is your thing is about, whether you're doing entertainment, whether you're doing football, whether you're doing news, whatever it is, so that, some kind of activism for the environment. Maybe you're reaching out to people, heads of different things, or reaching out to people at 3M, whatever it is, anything. People, local politicians, they would honestly, if you started a podcast today about that kind of thing, you could get local politicians on. You could even get the news to say,
And you are correct. Podcasting is another niche in that whole audio publishing industry. It's like self-publishing for books, things like that. With the advent of technology and skills, you can do anything. So this kind of podcasting says, I'm not an official FCC, college trained broadcaster. I am. You could be, but you don't have to be. There are no rules because now it's wide open. Everyone has access to it.
I mean, I don't listen to radio shows. I don't want to say, oh, I have to turn on a dial to this particular AM radio station at 11 o'clock or whatever on Thursdays or something. I want to say, I will subscribe. Whenever you push something out, I want to know about it. And at my earliest convenience, I will listen to it. I'll listen to it in the car today from 5 to 6 during my commute. That's it, or when I'm doing yard work or something. So it's like shifting it to a more tech savvy 2019 society.
On demand.
How does this compare to the, I don't know if they're podcasts, but where you can see people's comments live as they're talking? Is that,
That's more of a webinar format,
okay?
and there's like a chat section on the screen.
Yeah.
Like YouTube and so forth, the comments that pop up. So there's a feed of chat going on at the same time as the stream of video or audio.
Keep going.
Okay.
Can't you enable that when you do the live stream?
Yes.
Yes.
I did include that, but there's something at some point in here when you're setting it up,
That you can turn on comments.
literally right over here where there's literally a
You can turn on
checkbox.
comments.
Yeah,
Where
turn on
you
comments.
the live comment.
So there's additional interaction that's going on.
And I just didn't want to include all that because we're just getting started and it was just a little extra. That's why it was actually cut off. There's a tiny little thing here that's talking about whether they're actually going to allow that.
You did a fabulous job.
Well, all right, too. So in that YouTube app interface, that is a piece of software that has to be turned on. Like you said, an option that's turned on. When you're doing webcasting, streaming, that's one way. The podcasting and the audio, there's a little bit of something going on with, your iPod or whatever you're listening with, but there's not too much room for chat. So if you're doing a live event and streaming the audio live, you could have a comments area, a chat, or an SMS push going on.
I'm pretty sure Facebook Live has that as well.
So that's something that you can turn on. And that's a lot of fun. That's one of the pieces that makes it more social. When you have an event and people can come in. I listen to some of my favorite musicians have streaming concerts and do the chat.
But last question,
Yes.
or back here.
When you guys track new listeners and what episodes they're listening to, what kind of like data and analytics do you have at your fingertips to see how many new users you're getting? Are they listening to older episodes? That kind of stuff.
Well, like I said, we have kind of a pretty easy built-in audience, and so we see how many episodes are downloaded for each one, and of course all told, and I just see the numbers going up and up and up in general. Now you're asking some pretty interesting stuff, like are these repeat listeners, things like that. I haven't even bothered to look. When the numbers keep going up and up, I don't really care. But I imagine it would be not quite so easy for other venues, like when you're trying to figure out how do I use my social capital. You're gonna want to be on point about that. Do you have a little more insight in that?
You have the subscription service that you publish through. They have a panel, a profile panel that tells you by episode what's going on. You can put Google Analytics on the web page that you posted your MP3 on and see the traffic on that. And it's kind of, it's like a click through, like if someone leaves your website to go to one of your guests, to go to their site to to go to their page. So having a second sales page that is a click-through from your page tells you that someone listened, knew about it, and then went to the other site. So there, you can put kind of Easter egg pieces that you can see people pass through. And again.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question.
It is a good question.
And that's something when you're trying to build up an audience, figuring out, are people coming back?
And what keywords are they searching to find you too? And that helps you, funnel more people to yourself. And again, search engine optimization, we get more wrapping around a website as compared to just leaving it in iTunes. YouTube, again, you get more analytics about who's seeing it, who's commenting on it, visitors, and so forth.
All right, I think we'll wrap it up. We're
Yes.
running out of time here.
Very
so-
good. So,
Thank you, everybody. Yep.
Thank you.
All right, now, and coming to the closing here, I think it was a great event, a lot of fun. A lot of these things are, kind of skip our pants. We're kind of throw these things together and figure out what it is. Normally, our normal meetings are a little bit different. We have a more set, rigid schedule, and we have more people involved. Our club is a lot larger than the 5 members of our club that are here. We have about 20-ish people, and a typical meeting has around 12 people, depending on how many guests we have. And it's a lot of fun. We have a whole bunch of different roles, multiple speakers, where we have a couple of speeches, 5 to 7 minutes usually. We have a lot of impromptu speaking. And of course, the most important part is the evaluation, immediate feedback. Right now, maybe we're not getting quite as much feedback, but in general, we come together to help each other out and improve in whatever our communication and leadership goals are. So remember that. The way I like to say it is, when I go to a conference and I'm giving a presentation, I'm the giver and everyone else is the receiver. But when I go to TechMasters, we all put in a nickel and we all walk away with $1. It's much more inclusive. We're all adding in, and whoever you are, whatever your level is, we all started here and we just go up and up and up. And whoever you are, you have something to offer us, and we have something hopefully to offer you. All right, I'm going to turn it over to our presiding officer, Madam President Lori.
Thank you, Vince. Thank you all. I'm proud of your busy schedules and to join us here. This is so much fun. Of course, we love to talk shop. We love to talk about our speaking, and it was very fun for all of us to share it with you. I would hope that you have a chance to join us for one of our regular meetings. Mark is our VP of membership. Please contact him. You have your folders. Also, Kim brought up something interesting. There's a thing called a certificate of attendance. If you would like one of those for this event, please come up and I will give you one. We're going to start doing that on demand. So thank you for bringing that to my attention. And at this time, I would like to adjourn. We'll be here for a little while to tear down. So if you have questions,
Yep.
I can answer questions while I tear down.
You charge me for autographs?
Oh, grass. Oh,
Yeah.